This is Mike.
And Beck.
And Nina.
And we are Brew Crime. All right, we are back for part 2 of our Dismemberment episodes.
Mm-hmm.
So this
Delicious.
one... Yeah, delicious.
Ew.
Awkward. All right, so we'll get into this. My story's title is The Toronto Gay Village Killer.
Oh. This asshole.
Yes. All right, well, let's crack this beer first. I'll pass that to you.
So you guys both did kind of ongoing episodes.
Yeah, like this, he just was sentenced as of recording a couple days ago, so it's perfect for that.
Whoa, this beer is dark.
It's so
Yes.
dark.
So this beer is from Collective Arts Brewing out of Ontario.
Fitting.
This one's called This is a series of beers, actually. It's a series of collaborations. This is called The Origin of Darkness, which I think ties really well into this story. It's a bourbon barrel-aged stout. This version is with a brewery called... It's a collaboration with Forbidden Root. I'm not sure where they're from, actually. This is a bourbon barrel-aged stout with cocoa...
Oh, Nina. Nina loves it. I can tell by her squishy
I can't
face.
pronounce this. The Guajillo...
Here, let me try.
Guajillo cherries?
I happen to be pretty good at words.
I don't know.
Guajillo?
Maybe that's it.
Chilies.
That's
not
better.
cherries.
Juan.
Chilies. Huh. And radish honey. It's 11.5% alcohol. And here's our quick description here. Masters of mixing flavors, we teamed up with our friends Forbidden Root from Chicago to create this blend of deliciousness. We added radish honey. What did you say that was? The what peppers?
Guajillo chilies.
The Wahila peppers and cocoa nibs to the barrels, which resulted in a massive, deep chocolate flavor with background heat from the peppers and subtle spice hints of the unique radish honey.
And just, where are they from in Ontario? Or you didn't
Let
see?
me just pull that up. Burlington Street in Hamilton, Ontario.
It's a really
Well,
pretty
Burlington is
design.
also a city. It's not really
Yeah,
that
no,
far.
this is from Hamilton. Actually, before I get into my story, which is a pretty dark one, Collective Arts is really neat because this is one too, actually, but it's not as obvious. Collective Arts actually calls out for local or Canadian artists to send in their art, and they feature them on their cans and bottles.
The brewery looks so fucking cool. Look at that.
Yeah, the artwork looks amazing. Yeah,
Let's see.
Cool.
It's super neat.
If I was going to go to Hamilton, which I wouldn't,
I've got family there, so I do plan on getting there
it
one
looks
day.
really cool. Wow. Yeah, and the artwork on they've got like the bottles and cans and everything on the walls at the brewery, and it looks really cool.
All right, so this beer is definitely another one of these like super black, inky stouts. That like milk chocolate head. Smells a ton like oak and bourbon. Get lots of toffee and a bit of maybe a little hint of spice in the nose, but lots of chocolate and a bit of honey.
It's delicious. Sweet.
Yeah, that is delicious. It tastes like vanilla and bourbon and oak and chocolate, toffee, maybe some brown sugar, bit of honey, just ever so slight chili flavor. It masks that alcohol really well.
How about you, Nina?
I'll take your word for it, guys. Yep. It's
Nice.
not the worst I've had, but I think my palate is definitely not this.
It's not for this yet. Maybe one day.
I'm getting there.
I decided that the Brew Crime t-shirt we should get for you should say designated lager drinker.
I'm okay with that. Hey, but I like this other one.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Last
you really
episode,
like
so-
the limb from limb.
This is so awful. I can't even
You don't
finish
have
it.
to drink it.
I'm not going to.
Yeah, just...
I don't know that you want that last.
Yeah, she does.
You don't have cooties, right?
I can neither confirm nor deny that.
She's got all the cooties.
Alcohol disinfects.
Yes, it does.
Especially that dark blackness.
It's as dark as Mike's heart.
And my soul, yes.
I don't know. I feel like if that's true, like my soul's pretty dark. But I like light beers. So.
You enjoy a contrast.
Yes, exactly.
I'm a bag of mixed emotion.
All right. Between the years of 2010 and 2017, the city of Toronto, Ontario, Canada, knew they had a problem. Men from the Game Village neighborhood of the city were disappearing, and they had no idea what was happening to them.
Church Street.
Yes, I'll get to that. For those like me that do not live in Toronto, the Gay Village is also known as Church in, is it Wellesley?
Wellesley.
Wellesley? Mm-hmm. It's a LGBTQ community in the city that is bordered by the streets of Gerrard Street to the south, Yonge Street to the west, Charles Street to the north, and Jarvis Street to the east. Mm-hmm. The core of the commercial hub of the neighborhood was located along Church Street between Wellesley and Alexander. Have you been there?
Yes, yes.
Lots?
Mm-hmm. I was in... they have the best part I've been to. I've been to 3 different prides in the States, and Vancouver Pride is, well, it's an adorable effort. It's like if a high school put on a pride parade. That's what Vancouver's is like. I'm sorry for people listening, but yeah, Vancouver's is cute. Toronto's is amazing because the city shuts down. Like Church Street is shut down. The cross streets are shut down. Like they commit to it as a full party.
I've never been, so I have nothing to compare it to.
Yeah. I haven't been to Ontario since I was a newborn, so I have no idea what's going on there.
Well, there's 2 reasons to go to Toronto, and that's Pride or the Blue Jays.
So Pride, because I hate the Blue Jays.
Okay, whoa there. Whoa there.
Whoa there. Whoa now.
This guy don't.
And Drake's from there.
Okay.
So still one reason.
Anyway, it's amazing. Yeah. Like the city really fully commits to
That's awesome.
The area.
What the Toronto Police Service did know was that there were men of South Asian and Middle Eastern origin going missing from the Toronto Gay Village. In response to the disappearance, the Toronto Police opened up Project Houston. Project Houston began in November 2012, 2 years after the first man disappeared. The project would end up running for a total of 18 months, but let's get into the details here.
What's with the name?
Yeah, why Houston? Like, Houston, we have a problem. There's people disappearing. Like, I don't get it.
It might even be that stupid, yeah.
Canadians.
Okay. Hey there.
Toronto. I'm a Canadian citizen.
Mm-hmm.
The project opened up with the investigation of the disappearance of Skandarij Navaratam. You want to look at this name and try to help me out here?
Skandanavaratam.
Thank you. I thought the Russian names from the last episode were hard, but these are actually pretty hard. On September 6, 2010, police would spend time searching Riverdale Park that is close to the village where LGBTQ would like to cruise for dates. The police would search it with both Navaratam's friends and then later with horse-mounted police and cadaver dogs. By 2012, police suspected that he had been murdered, but they had absolutely no leads to go on. There had been a post on the website called Zambian Meat in 2012 that claimed a person had killed and eaten a man in the Toronto area.
Oh my God.
This may have been what started up Project Houston. After 6 months of detective work, where the 51st Division of the Toronto Police had been bringing their evidence to the homicide squad, and Hank Edzinga, the cannibalism claim was ruled out. These names.
Hank Azaria. Got it.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you.
Zinga.
The investigation had zoomed in on James Alex Brutton, 69, that they had given the codename Subject Zero.
Sorry, he's 69?
He was.
Okay. Subject Zero is a badass name.
Now, in the end, it has nothing to do with this, but this is who they thought did it.
No, that's fine. I wasn't sure if you were saying a name that they had assigned to him or saying his age, so I just wanted to confirm. 69. Okay, cool.
Sorry. He was a retired hospital technician that lived about an hour and a half drive away from Peterborough, Ontario.
That's where I went to college.
Nice. Scary, but nice. He was not the killer of Skanda, but he was not an innocent person nonetheless, and he was convicted of possession, creation, and distribution of child pornography, better described as child exploitation material.
Boo.
So at least they caught someone early on.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, as of June 2013, the police task force had identified more men that were missing from the same general area. The missing persons were linked via geography and because of their LGBTQ background. The 2 men were Abdul Basir Fazi and Majid Hamid Kayhan. Like the first missing men, these 2 men were of South Asian origin and in their middle ages. Mm-hmm. These 2 men, though, were married to women, although they were having affairs with men in the church in Wellesley area.
That's not really
It's a cultural thing, yeah.
Yeah.
This is the area that the police were able to link to their disappearances. It's just sad that because of their culture, they had to hide the fact they were gay, and it probably made it easier to find them as victims, right?
Yeah, exactly, because they wouldn't have told anyone where they were going.
Yeah.
And they, like, it would have been like super hush hush. They would have been the only ones knowing, and he would have preyed upon that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was one lead to go on for two of these men, as they had one link between the two of them, and this came from an anonymous tip. Two of them had both been linked to a man named Bruce McArthur, and both men had connected with him on dating apps.
What dating app?
I don't know for these two men, but I'll bring up a lot later which apps that he was involved with, and they're all apps for gay men, basically.
Okay.
The police brought MacArthur in for an interview in 2013 and confirmed he had a romantic relationship with Navartnam and had met Kahan. In the end, Project Houston would end with no evidence that would help to link these men's disappearances or that a crime had been committed, and worse, there was no suspect. They were just missing, right?
Mm-hmm. But they knew he was connected to these missing people?
Yeah.
But they still felt like they had no suspects?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Moved to 2016, and a case summary was made that stated that there was still no new leads and nothing to explain what had happened to these three men of Project Houston.
They didn't get abducted by aliens. Like...
Well, there's no body, like they could have left. I don't know. I mean, obviously they weren't just disappearing, but... Move forward to June 25th, 2017, the day of Pride Toronto. Luckily, the Pride Parade went off without a hitch, but sadly, the next day would not be the same. Andrew Kinsman would go missing from the Cabbagetown neighborhood in central Toronto. He was last seen near his home on Winchester Street. A few days went by, and on June 28th, one of his friends realized no one had heard from him, and they gained access to his apartment. His apartment did not look out of sorts at all, but his 17-year-old cat had run out of food and water.
No, I don't like that.
This would definitely raise alarm for anyone that knows a pet owner. Pets are a huge part of any family, after all. Mm-hmm. So the next day, the friends would report his disappearance to the police. With the friends calling the police in the first 72 hours after his disappearance, the police said that they were able to find a crucial piece of evidence, and they said the evidence would have been lost if they had waited longer. They had found an entry into his calendar that said Bruce on the date June 26th.
Ooh.
From this, they pulled a surveillance image from Kinsman's building and found a fleeting photo of a man leaving the building. They also saw a 2004 Dodge Caravan, but did not get a license plate. There were 6,000 similar caravans in Toronto, but only 5 were registered to a person named Bruce.
Uh-huh. I love that shit.
It does, thinking.
Love that. Deductive reasoning.
Nice.
Okay.
The first 3 men that went missing were not openly gay, and 2 were even in straight marriages. Andrew Kinsman was unlike those men, as he was openly gay and had a deep connection to the gay village and the community in general. Let's touch on what we know about Andrew Kinsman. What we know is he worked in the neighborhood as a bartender, and also know that he was a longtime volunteer for the Toronto People with AIDS Foundation. He was even the superintendent at his apartment building. This is to say he was a person that was not going to up and leave the area, especially not without his cat and his prescriptions that were found in his home.
So if you didn't make it so fucking shameful to be out, be a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. Well, and like this guy wasn't
Exactly.
worried about it at all.
That's what I mean. So
at least they found him, or figured out he was missing quickly.
But that's what I mean with the other guys. Because they had to hide that part of their life, it was nearly impossible to track it.
Yeah.
And if you weren't, society wasn't full of so much shame for that.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have happened, maybe.
Yeah.
Something that kind of comes out as a type that he looks for. This is a little bit about Kinsman. Kinsman was not a small man either. He was 6'4", and he was also 220 pounds. He was also not a kid at 49 years old. And he was also very street savvy, and this made it all the more unlikely to the police that he would have been a victim of violence. Which you find out later is untrue, but you don't expect someone of that stature to be the victim of a crime half the time, right?
Yeah, it seems outside of the norm I'm looking for victims for, quote, Bruce. Person we don't know yet. You know what I'm saying?
So a friend and coworker of Kinsman named Greg Downer helped lead community-driven efforts to find both Kinsman and the other men missing in the gay village. He went on to found 2 Facebook groups dedicated to trying to find the missing men. These groups would be known as Find Andrew Kinsman and also Toronto's Missing Rainbow Community. Both of these groups would go on to have 600 or so members each. These groups would strive to organize search parties to find the missing men, as well as try to and help to raise awareness of the missing men. Through these groups and other social media platforms, a photo showing 12 missing men would be shared, where all were presumed to be gay. This list would have one name removed for one reason or another. It then turned out that this information was outdated, and 5 of the men had been found after some time alive and well. Later, a 6th was discovered, but it was deemed to be a suicide. Again, probably just because of trying to hide who they are. It's hard to find these people. The last 5 photos in this first batch of 12 contained the 3 missing men from Project Houston, as well as Kinsman and a new name, Salim SN, a man who disappeared on April 14th, 2017. So again, this is fairly current.
Yeah, quite.
Speculation was starting to run rampant that there was a serial killer on the loose in the gay village. Finally, at the end of the month of July 2017, the Toronto police opened up a new task force to try and figure out what the hell was going on. The task force was known as Project Prism, an apt name as we all know about the rainbow flag and what prisms do with light.
Okay, I get that. I've seen
It's much better than Project Houston.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know.
Definitely agree. I don't understand Houston because this is a crime that took place completely in Canada, and it's like...
It's like, Houston, we have a problem.
I didn't
That's
even
about
pick up on that until you said it, and I was like, no, I guess. I mean, it's a stretch, but it's there.
Yeah. The official mandate of the project was to look into the disappearance of Kinsman and SN and search for any links to the missing men from Project Houston. Luckily, they were trying to, combine both of them. The task force was overseen by Detective Sergeant Michael Richmond. Thank you for the easy name. And led by Detective Sergeant Hank
Azaria?
That's what you get.
Hank Azaria.
A man that had served on the homicide squad for over 13 years and was part of the Project Houston for 6 months. The task force did not stop there, as it had members of the sex crime unit as well as half a dozen of the police from 51st Division. Half of those from the police 51st Division were also part of Project Houston. Investigations like this can prove difficult due to the promiscuity and of the lifestyle many of the victims lived. Many would meet up with men they had never met before and only connected over dating apps. It was noted in the investigation, though, that Kinsman and Essen would not go anywhere without at least notifying their friends and family.
Yeah.
But I mean, like we were saying, a lot of these men are trying to hide the fact that they're going to this gay village to find men, so no one knows where they are. At
exactly.
least
these they weren't cloaked in so many levels of societal shame.
Yeah. These 2 men were open about it. They still went missing, but
at least it was like, I'm going to meet this guy, Bruce.
Yeah.
Whereas everyone else was like, oh, I'm
gonna go to get some milk.
I have to go get... Exactly what I was going to say, Nina.
Really?
Nailed it.
Calling back from another episode.
Oh, ew, yeah.
Ew. Like milk. And not from a bag, from a carton.
Okay, yeah.
I thought we were referring to the liquor in the milk
I
carton.
was.
Okay.
I was.
Oh,
There's nothing wrong with bagged milk, okay? Speaking of someone from Ontario, it's cheaper, and you can recycle it, and it just makes more sense. If you drink 4 liters of milk in a week, what you do in Ontario, because it's only $3.
I think
you heard me.
I think
$3.
Only, people from India drink that kind of milk here.
No, I'll go.
Indian cooking is all about cream and milk and blah, blah, blah,
That's
blah,
why
blah.
it tastes so good.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. All right, back to this. Greg Downer, the organizer of the Facebook groups, would organize a community safety meeting on August 1st, 2017. The police would go on to give an overview of what the task force was doing. The community was also thanked for the abundance of information that they were giving to the police. During the community meeting, as quoted from Wikipedia, queer refugees, transgender, and two-spirit people spoke of their vulnerability, experiencing disproportionate violence within the LGBTQ community. For people that do not know what two-spirit people are, here is a definition. Two-spirit people, or two-spirited, is used to describe certain First Nations or Native people in their communities who fulfill a traditional third gender, or other gender variant ceremonial roles in their cultures. So I didn't know, I knew enough about Two-Spirited, but not fully that definition, so I thought I'd add it in.
Yeah. That's fair.
Never heard it before.
I've got some First Nations friends, so I'd heard about it.
And I'm a big queer, so I'd heard about it.
Well said. All right. The missing rainbow community would go on to provide ideas on how you could stay safe when it came to using dating apps and meeting new people. They even pushed online dating apps to add an option for users to consent to having their data released if they ever went missing. Not a bad idea, really.
Yeah, that is
Just
a
in
good
general.
idea.
I don't know if it ever happened. There was never anything that said if it happened or not, but that should be there. This would help.
But just for everybody.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean. Just in
Okay.
general, it
But
should.
aren't
It's
they
a
able
great
to
idea.
just subpoena, though? Like, if they can see the app on your phone, can't they subpoena the company to release?
They can,
I think-
but they have to have just cause to get that subpoena granted.
Yeah, so I think this
person's
was
easy.
like without the formality of
Yeah.
it. It's like, if you can't find me, just like release
As
my
soon as
information.
what this is saying is, as soon as there's a missing person case, instantly they want it to have it just released.
Right. Okay.
This would help police in the search for information, as much of the data for these apps are held outside of Canada, and that would be very murky area for legalities and would lead to delays in the most crucial part of the investigations.
The first 48 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't think of that. I mean, everybody uses these dating apps regardless of the country. I didn't really think about how if the home base is
Here or not.
in the States, then it
Or anywhere
it's
else.
the
yeah.
local laws that are applicable.
Yeah. And I mean, the same with
Your
social media in
local
general,
laws.
right? But
Yeah.
police also proceeded to set up hotlines so that people that were reticent to speak to them could do more easily. You know,
Yeah.
do it without having to say who you are. It's always easier. Police were looking into 5 possible drivers of the 2004 Dodge Caravan, and in late August or September, they finally made a match with surveillance videos of one resident. The van was no longer located there, though, which is troubling for the police. But they now suspected Bruce McArthur could be involved in Andrew Kinsman's disappearance.
Good.
Finally. Yeah.
Good.
No.
We know who Bruce is.
Yeah. In redacted warrants and police documents that came out in mid-2018, it was made known that the police between August and September 2017 received warrants compelling the release of private data from Google, Rogers, Bell, Telus, Royal Bank, and Manulife Bank.
Wow.
Then, in October, even more tracking warrants were given that would give information on the companies of Yahoo, Air Canada, additional banks, and Pink Triangle Press, an LGBT publisher. So they're getting a lot of information now. Most likely to keep the information quiet and not tip off the subject, the police put in a request to place the warrants under judicial seal. This would also be done for the info gained later in September and also in October.
Sorry, does that mean that the information that they've gained is
Hidden from
like-
the public.
okay? So it's beneficial to them and not to the public.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Unfortunately,
Good.
Which is it's a good way to make sure that you don't tip someone off, but it also means it doesn't help out anyone else that could be a victim later.
Yeah.
So move forward to October 3rd. The Toronto police were sending plainclothes cops to possible locations where the caravan could have been sold off. They made their way to Dom's Auto Parts in Courtice, Ontario, 70 kilometers northeast of Toronto. Ever heard of that place?
No.
No? Okay.
Toronto, yeah.
The owner of the shop, Dominic Vetier, I think it is, confirmed he had purchased the vehicle from Bruce back on September 16th. Happy to have tracked down the vehicle, they hooked it up to a tow truck and brought it back to Toronto to investigate. They also took the surveillance videos that had Bruce McArthur inside the store the day of the sale. The Missing Rainbow Community Group would search Toronto's ravine system every week to look for signs of missing men. By the end of October, the weekly searches had been stepped up to daily searches. Still not finding evidence, the searches had to be called off in early December as winter had set in and ice and snow did not allow for the investigation.
That makes sense.
Yeah, they get real winters in Ontario. Fears continued to rise of the possibility of a serial killer as the body of Tess Ritchie was found, although someone else would be found to be her killer. The day after her body was found, Toronto police announced that they had found another body of Allura Wells, a homeless transgender woman, back in August in the Rosedale Ravine. This murder has not been solved at this point. Doesn't really sound like his MO, but it's still scary when you've got these people showing up.
Yeah.
Public had no idea who this could be at this point. Mm-hmm. They just knew there was a killer.
Right. And
or there was someone probably around.
Right. And she was, I'm presuming, by your gender indication, that she was male to female.
They mentioned it was a female name and transgender. So that means to me they've transitioned to a woman.
Not really his MO.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Bruce McArthur was known to be a landscaper at this point, so the police started to dig into his business dealings.
Literally.
In November, cadaver dogs were brought to a residence on Mallory Crescent in what is known as the Leaside neighborhood of Toronto. You ever heard of that neighborhood?
No.
Okay. Like I said, I've never been to Toronto as anything but a newborn, so I have no idea. McArthur had a deal with a resident where he would work on their yard in exchange for the ability to store his landscaping equipment in the garage. While the dogs did not indicate that they had found any remains at this time, the police did put a security camera in anyways so they could monitor the activity in the yard. The next step in the investigation was to get a log of his key fob for his apartment. They used this in conjunction with his cell phone data that they had gotten through earlier warrants to make a timeline of the day that Kinsman went missing. Sounds like pretty decent police work to me.
Yeah.
At the same time, DNA found in the van had been tested and matched to both Kinsman and SM.
That's pretty clear.
Yeah. This gave Toronto police the break they needed to get a general warrant to get full access to his home in December 4th, 2017. The police entered McArthur's home and cloned his computer's hard drive, all without his knowledge.
Wow.
This would bring more damaging evidence in the case later. On December 8th, the Chief of Police, Mark Saunders of the Toronto Police Services, would hold what would be considered an unprecedented news conference. They did inform the public that they interviewed 62 witnesses at this point. Without pointing to a suspect, they did convey that they had been conducting searches around Toronto and were using resources that included mounted police dogs, and even one drone. This press conference would go on to tell the public they did not think that there was a connection to these different cases, and would also go on to say there was no evidence of a serial killer, which I call bullshit on. There is all kinds of evidence.
Yeah, with that many missing people, all from the same community.
Some with definite connections. So moving to January 2018, the investigation picked right back up where it had left off at the end of 2017. The police noted later that they had spent many 15-hour days investigating, and there was even a 72-hour stretch at one point in mid-January of a very intense investigation. Time was running out for Bruce McArthur, though, and on January 17th, 2 new pieces of evidence would be brought to light that would directly connect the disappearance of SN and Kingsman to McArthur. From that point on, he was under round-the-clock surveillance, and there were instructions that if he were seen alone with anyone, that he would be arrested on the spot.
Wow.
So that was on the 17th, right? It did not take long for him to be arrested either, as on January 18th, 2018, the police saw a young man enter his Thorncliffe Park apartment. The police believed the man was in danger and took action to arrest Bruce.
Wow.
One day after the...
Yeah.
One day after they said arrest him if he's seen with someone alone.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's so wild, right? Like, I wonder how they got that permission, you know what I mean? Like, if you see him with anyone else, just arrest him. Yeah,
I guess at that point they had enough evidence that they thought he was the guy, and if they saw him alone with someone...
Better safe than sorry.
Safe. Exactly.
Better safe than murdered,
yeah,
really.
Exactly. The man that had met at McArthur's apartment that night had met him through the dating app Growler, a gay bear social network, according to the Growler website. I had never heard of this before, but I'm not the right person to be looking for it.
Well, I mean, if you were gay, you'd be on Growler.
If I was gay, I'd probably be on Growler, yes.
Obviously a bear.
Yeah. Straight bear.
Yeah, if that was a thing. Yeah.
When the police breached the house, they found the man handcuffed to the bed. McArthur had put a black bag over on a man's head, and it even tried to tape his mouth shut.
I mean, everybody's into something different, but it doesn't sound like first date material to me.
He would not have survived if the police had not been surveilling the home, as he had agreed to keep his relationship with McArthur a secret.
Yeah. Sad.
He was luckily fairly unhurt, though, and only shaken up. He was hurt, but, you know, in the scheme of things, he was in pretty good shape.
Yeah.
The man was only known as John during the court appearance, but he told the court that he had come to Canada only 5 years earlier from the Middle East. He was married and had not told the family that he was actually a gay man.
Yeah. Fuck.
Again.
Yeah. If it wasn't such a, like, social stigmatism.
Yeah, especially in the Middle Eastern and South Asian groups.
Yeah, it's definitely much harder on them.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I
Even
don't want to
harder.
generalize, but realistically, it is much harder on men than it is on women.
There's no doubt about it. I mean,
Not that it's not hard on a lot of women. It really, really is. But
cis white males will dream about lesbians and just exactly, but they will. Whereas they'll look at gay men and be like, "Ew," right?
Yeah, he's less of a man. That's just so not true. Because
So
I know some like super fucking stereotypical, manly, gay men, but society's fucked up.
Yeah, no, I agree. During the arrest, the police would go on to seize his electronic devices, including things like his 5 cell phones.
What? Why?
First flag.
Why?
5 computers.
No.
1 man with 5 computers seems weird. 3 digital cameras. Not quite as weird. And around 12 USB memory sticks.
That's not really weird. I don't even know how many USB sticks I have, and
I've lost more than I know.
literally don't use any of them.
Yeah. Well, I use them about once a month for this. From the evidence in this apartment, the police pressed charges of 2 counts of first-degree murder.
To start?
These would be the suspected deaths of Andrew Kinsman and Salim Essen. The police had not found their bodies at this point, but they had evidence that gave them, quote, a pretty good idea of how the men had died. Hank Nzinga of Project Prism would announce that the Toronto police were satisfied that they would have enough evidence to convict him of these murders, even without the bodies. The evidence would have to be compelling, as it is very hard to get this kind of conviction without a body.
Yep.
They would also say at this point that they believed that he was likely going to be implicated in many other men's deaths, and they were very focused on identifying these victims. And by the end of the month of January, the police finally admitted that they were investigating an alleged serial killer. Finally. They would let the public know that they suspected he was concealing evidence by burying it all over the city. They would go on to describe it as an unprecedented ongoing case. February would bring more charges to Bruce McArthur, and the investigation would be expanded to include unsolved murder cases, hundreds of missing person cases, and cases of sudden death. This was being coordinated with hundreds of officers in Toronto, as well as other Canadian and international police forces. Police were also receiving tips from around the world, including countries that McArthur had been on vacation in. That's even more scary, really.
Yeah.
Not only was he killing people in Canada, he might have been doing it outside of Canada.
Was he?
We don't know, actually.
Okay.
But there's a very good possibility.
I wasn't sure if you were like, I'm getting to it.
No, that one's a... No
it's
one
a
knows.
mystery.
There's a lot of mystery. On January 18th, 2018, the day of his arrest, the police would execute search warrants on 5 properties that were associated with McArthur and his landscaping business. 4 of these properties would be in Toronto, and one was a 9-acre, 3.5-hectare property about 200 kilometers or 120 miles away in Madoc, Ontario. First, the Madoc property and a home in Toronto on Conlins Road were searched. They were both owned by a landscaper and longtime friend of McArthur named Roger Horan. The next property was that of a former boyfriend on Concord Place. On January 23rd, all 3 of these properties were released back to their owners. So, no evidence there. Now, McArthur's high-rise apartment and the Mallory Crescent residence in Leaside that I mentioned earlier were different. The owners of the Leaside house had been barred from their house on January 18th. This measure was taken so that the police could get their forensic team on the property. From there, they also moved the search to a ravine beside the property. The search of the ravine was done using cadaver dogs as well as members of heavy urban search and rescue teams. On January 19th, only the day after his arrest, cadaver dogs would take a strong interest in many large planter boxes on the property.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Unfortunately, this is Ontario in winter, so the planters had frozen to the ground, and heaters had to be brought in on site to thaw them. The first large planter was wrapped up on January 22nd and shipped off to the coroner's office. They couldn't even do it on site.
Oh my God.
The OPP, or Ontario Provincial Police, the province's Forensic Pathology Services, and the Centre of Forensic Sciences were working with the Toronto Police Service with this search. It was said that the cadaver dogs were having trouble catching scents because the ground was so frozen.
That makes sense.
Probably why they didn't catch it the first time they were there. Mm-hmm. Because of this, tents were set up in the backyard with heaters to gradually thaw the ground. They even used ground-penetrating radar to try and find the bodies. Forensic pathologists expected to take at least 10 days to excavate the yard by hand. When Dr. Kathy Gruspier arrived, though, to oversee the excavation, she did not see any soil disturbance from previous digging, so it's probably going to take longer.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense, though, because it's like if the grounds had been recently touched for landscaping, it's like, was it landscaping or was it
body
like,
disposal?
Yeah. There's no scientific method to tell between I'm planting flowers and I'm planting a head.
Planting bodies doesn't sprout.
Mm-hmm. Well,
usually. Once the planters had all been shipped off to the coroner's office and the soil had been thawed, the work of searching the planters could begin. On January 29th, the police announced that they had found the dismembered skeletal remains of at least 3 people. These remains were found in 2 of the 12 large planters that had been seized from their residences. This evidence brought about 3 more charges of first-degree murder to Bruce McArthur. The remains had yet to be identified, but the charges were laid in the presumed deaths of Majid Kayhan, a Project Houston subject, Saroush Muhamdi, who disappeared in 2015, and Dean Lisowick. Dean Lisowick was a homeless man that was never reported missing, but the police had their reasons to think he was dead. It's even more sad, isn't it?
It is, because there was no one there to report him.
Yeah.
And it's like Bruce probably just thought he'd get away with it because nobody cared, but that makes it even more sad.
I agree. According to former homicide detective Mark Mendelson, he said that the investigation would become the largest Toronto had ever undertaken. Michael Arnsfield, a criminologist and professor at Western University, said that the method of disposal of the body suggested that he was a sophisticated killer. He was a killer that had developed his craft and would state that as most serial killers start their killings in their 20s, Bruce McArthur's crimes may go back decades. He was in his mid-60s when he was arrested, after all. This could represent one of the longest runs for serial killers on record if proven. John Branford, a forensic psychologist and expert on serial killers, had stated that McArthur's past as a traveling salesman could mean that police might have a province-wide investigation on their hand.
That makes sense.
On February 8th, the police would announce that they had found even more remains in planters at the Leaside home. They would find 3 more people's remains in 6 different sets. They were able to identify one of the sets of remains of Andrew Kinsman through fingerprints. At this point, the police would state that it could take months before they could identify all of the remains that they had found at this point. The Leaside house was considered ground zero for the investigation, and the police had established a command post on the property. Finally, sometime on either February 10th or 11th, the investigation inside the home at Leaside was finished and the house was released back to the family. Imagine being kept out of your house for that long and not being involved.
No.
Because yes, you're involved in that you let him use your property, but you're not involved.
No, how could you have known, right?
Mm-hmm. He was just some nice man.
Mm-hmm.
On February 13th, 2 sewage lines on the property were excavated and one section of one of the pipes was removed and sent to the lab for testing. February 23rd brought on a 6th count of first-degree murder for the death of Skandarij Navarthman. I apologize for saying all these names wrong. They're not easy for me. Mm-hmm. He was one of the men from Project Houston investigation years ago. Using dental records, Skandarij, Navarathim, and Sarush Muhammadi's remains were recovered from the planters. On March 5th, the police would hold a new press conference. This time they would release a photo of an unidentified deceased man that was alleged to be another victim of McArthur. The police tried to identify the man outside of the public sphere, but they just could not get a break. Police would go on to get over 500 tips in regards to the photo they released and began to check on 22 possible identities. April 11th brought on the 7th charge of first-degree murder in the death of Abdul Basir Farizi. This charge now meant that he was charged with the deaths of all 5 of the men from Project Houston and Project Prism investigations. At this point, the investigators had finished the search of the Leaside planters and had found and identified the remains of all but Majid Hamid Kayhan. But they did have one more identified set of remains. April 16th would bring the number of charges up to 8 first-degree murder charges.
Wow.
This would be in the death of Karusha Kumar Karadam, and were the 7th set of remains identified from the planters. He was the unidentified last set of remains, and his identity was not found from the tips, but from an unidentified international agency. So we'll never really know, but at least they found him.
Yeah.
He did not want to be found, as he was a Tamil asylum seeker who was under a deportation order. Yeah. As such, he was never reported missing by his family.
Oh.
He had last contacted his family back in August 2015. He is believed to have been killed between September 3rd and December 14th, 2015.
That's so sad. I mean, this Bruce guy, this piece of shit, just...
Yeah.
He really preyed on people that he knew had to be quiet.
Yeah. For the most part, yes.
Yeah, I mean, mistakes were made, but...
Yeah, thankfully.
Yeah.
The police
Still so sad, though.
I know. The police would also go on to search other planters from around Toronto, but no other planters contained human remains that they found so far, at least.
Yeah.
The search of McArthur's house would be a 4-month investigation. During the forensic investigation, hundreds of hours were spent searching every corner and crevice of his apartment. They would find blood from what they believed to be 4 separate victims and suspected that at least some of the murders had taken place inside the home. They moved to his bedroom last after spending weeks at the rest of the house, as they expected the majority of the evidence to be located inside those walls. Makes sense.
Yeah.
The search of his home was finished on May 11th and had taken 10 forensic officials all this time to find their evidence. While there, they took more than 18,000 photographs and collected 1,800 pieces of evidence.
Wow.
They noted that they think the first murder took place in the apartment probably 8 years ago. It was said that Bruce McArthur would hide his identity online as well as cover his tracks using payphones instead of using one of his 5 cell phones that was found in his home. He would also avoid places where surveillance cameras were in place. But it was said that he would target men who were vulnerable, including men with no fixed address or men that had not told their families that they were gay. Police had drawn up a list of 15 homicide cold cases that could be linked back to the gay village. Police had also drawn up a list of 15 homicide cold cases that could be linked back to the gay village that would also fit the general profile of the victims that had been identified. But there were a total of 600 cold cases being sifted through at this time.
Oh my god. That's horrible.
Yeah. Investigators began to review cold cases dating back to as far as 1975 to 1997 for possible connections to Bruce McArthur. Some of the cold cases under investigation would be brutal murders in the gay village between 1975 and 1978. This would have put McArthur around 23 to 26 years old and would fit the profile that was laid out earlier. He worked only blocks from the gay village at this time. The men of these murders had all been gay men and were found in their homes all naked, tied to their beds, and stabbed or beaten to death. The manner of death was described as overkill in each case. As of October 2018, there are still no links to these cold cases, but the police are still searching.
So they don't even know if it was him or not.
No, they don't.
But it's like he was alive and he was old enough to do it, so...
And he was in the area. He was working there.
Yeah.
Yeah. The problem is, I think, what they caught him on is obviously someone who has honed their craft. Mm-hmm. That is not someone who just starts to kill people.
Yeah.
So they're...
You don't start at
This
that
sounds like something that could be a new serial killer trying to hone their craft, figure out what they want to do, like figure out what gets them off or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. You know, he's still targeting the same demographic. He's still binding them to their beds. But instead of, doing whatever and then killing them and dismembering them, he beat them to death and then left. And I mean, who knows? But it does sound like something he could have done.
I don't know what's going through his head, but it's like, if you're already completely screwed for your sentence or whatever, why not just admit to what you've done?
They never do, though.
Ugh.
Either that, or they just start making stuff up and
they
adding things,
just
right?
make shit up. Then it's like literally impossible. That's what you did. Ugh.
Yeah. When April and May rolled around, the investigators planned to return to searching the properties. Start to thaw out a little bit. Mm-hmm. They had 30 different ones that they had associated with McArthur. Mm-hmm. They just wanted to wait till the ground would thaw so that there was better accuracy with the cadaver dogs. Tips would continue to flow in, and the list of properties to search would balloon to 75 and then 100 properties, some outside of the Toronto area. A team of 7 cadaver dogs would begin the search by the second week of May, and some of the dogs were on loan from Greater Toronto Area Police Forces. By the first week of June, these searches had been finished and follow-up investigations were being considered. As July rolled around, 20 police officers would be excavating in the forested ravine behind the Leasehead property again. They sifted through large compost piles and used the cadaver dogs and forensic anthropologists. Sadly, they would find human remains almost every single day of this search.
Wow.
On July 20th, the police announced that they had found the remains of Majid Kahan. This would close the loop on all 8 of the alleged victims of Bruce McArthur. And these are the people they know pretty well were associated with him, not ones that they have as cold cases. Maybe kind of could be. Mm-hmm. Detective Sergeant Hank Itzinga at this point would say that they had no evidence to suggest that McArthur was connected to any other murders at this time.
No solid evidence.
Yeah. He did go on to say that the investigation into cold cases was ongoing, though. Mm-hmm. So they weren't closing it yet. Mm-hmm. Waterloo Regional Police would contact the investigation to inquire about the November 2002 disappearance of David McDormand from downtown Kitchener. Another possible victim of McArthur is John Riley of Meaford, Ontario. He had headed out to Toronto to find work in the landscaping industry and was planning to stay in a shelter in the Church and Wesley area. He disappeared in May 2013.
This seems pretty likely.
Yeah, again, it's
the right area, the right occupation, the right time.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So before we continue to talk about this piece of shit, let's get on to some of the victims here. A little more information on them, what I could find at least. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to butcher their names again, and I apologize. But Skandarij Skanda Navartham was 40 years old at the time of his disappearance. He was last seen in the early morning when he was leaving Zippers, what was once a gay village bar, on September 6, 2010. He was seen leaving the bar with an unknown man. Navartham was a Tamil refugee from Sri Lanka and was in Canada with no family members. He was a pet owner and had a dog that he loved. He was romantically involved with McArthur after they met in 1999. He also worked for McArthur at his landscaping business. His friends stated that they were still involved up until 2008. He was reported missing on September 10th or 11th, 2010. Abdul Basir Fazili was a 42-year-old man and an immigrant from Afghanistan. In his younger years, while living in Iran, one of his friends warned him not to come out as gay and said he should find God or leave. Unfortunately, this encounter stuck with him, and he would hide from his wife and family for the remainder of his life. Nah. He loved his daughters and worked a ton of overtime to make sure he could get them both everything they wanted for Christmas. He was last seen when he left his work on December 28th, 2010 in Mississauga, Ontario. So sad, so close to Christmas. Mm-hmm. And all he wanted to do was just get enough money to buy his daughters everything they wanted for Christmas,
to make
right?
sure that they had what they wanted.
Yeah. Looking back at his bank records, it was found that he was in the Church and Wellesley area. That last night included stops at Steamworks Bathhouse and the Black Eagle Bar. On December 29th, his disappearance was reported to the police. His 2002 Nissan Sentra would be found on Moore Avenue, close to the Beltline Trail. The Beltline Trail made its way through a small ravine that happened to be a cruising spot for gay men. Moore Avenue, where his car was found, connected to the Mallory Crescent, and the Leaside home where McArthur stored his landscaping equipment.
What a coincidence. Yeah.
Majid Hamid Kayhan was last seen on October 18th, 2012. He was 58 years old. You're going to kind of see there's a bit of a repeated middle-aged man, kind of larger, kind of the bear thing he was going for. Mm-hmm. He was spotted in the gay village near the intersection of Yonge Street and Alexander Street. On October 25th, his adult son would report his disappearance to the police. Kayhan and his wife and children fled Afghanistan in the late 1980s and made their way to Canada. Move forward to 2002, he and his wife would divorce, and he would come out to part of his family. He did not come out to his whole family, though, as it is said that his father was a Muslim cleric. Sadly, Majid Kayhan suffered from PTSD for much of his life from the Soviet-Afghan War and became a heavy drinker to cope with it. He had been spending time in the gay village since the mid-1990s, according to a local bartender, and stayed at his partner's apartment. His partner also had not come out to his family. Sadly, his partner would die at some point and took an interest in McArthur at the Black Eagle pub. Sarush Mohammadi was a 50-year-old at the time of his death. He worked at a manufacturing plant and lived with his wife. It's just so sad to keep having this come up.
Yeah.
These gay men living with their wives.
Yeah.
He came to Canada as a refugee from Iran and had come on his own at the time. He had no one in Canada until he met his wife. Once he married his wife, they moved to Barrie from Toronto to be closer to her family. He was not known to be part of the Toronto gay scene, although he did have a relationship with a transgendered woman for 4 years that he had met at a bar at the church in Wellesley Gay Village. He was last seen at his home in the South Cedarbrae neighborhood on August 14, 2015. He was reported missing by his wife sometime in August, but I could not find the date. I'll just assume it was close to the day he disappeared. Andrew Kinsman was 49 when he was last seen on June 26, 2017. As I mentioned before, he was last seen at the Pride Parade near his home in Cabbagetown. Kinsman had known McArthur for over a decade as he was a bartender at the Black Eagle. He had been seen carrying bags of landscaping debris on one of McArthur's landscaping projects back in 2011. He had also been in a sexual relationship for some time with McArthur. He was reported missing by a friend on June 29th. In a victim impact statement, his sister, Shelley Kinsman, would say this: "Although I've been robbed of my brother, my confidant, and my friend, the greatest tragedy is that society has been deprived of an extraordinary, quirky, and caring individual who did make a difference." Salim Essen was a Turkish citizen who originally moved to Canada with a partner that he had met in Turkey. He was, according to his friends, currently in an unhealthy relationship and often spent nights at other friends' houses. His friends said that he was struggling with an addiction problem, but was working on getting control of it. He had even finished a certificate program in peer counseling from St. Stephen's Community House just before he went missing. Unfortunately, McArthur was also a client of St. Stephen's and was very trusted within the community support organization. The last time Essen was seen for sure was on March 20th, 2017. A friend would go on to report him missing on April 20th of that year, a month later.
That's so sad that it would take that long to report someone missing.
It is. Dean Lizowick was in between 43 and 44 years old. It's not quite known. Mm-hmm. Sadly, he was one of the men that was never reported missing. He was a resident of the shelter system of the Toronto area. He would spend some of his time at the Scott Mission since 2003, but was last seen there on April 21st, 2016. He was a man that struggled with substance abuse, but was known as a very respectful man. He was a former sex worker, but was working to do more jobs as a cleaner and a laborer. He was also known as a sweet guy by other sex workers and said that he always stood up for them.
I know he was a drug addict, but I just don't think he deserved this. And he was a good friend. I mean, he had his problems, but it's just different because you live with him. I saw him over a year ago. He said he was going to be back, and then he never came back. And nobody knew what happened to him.
So how long did you live with him for then? In what years?
It was in 2016, I think was the last time, but he was only there for 2 months, and then he just disappeared. But I've known him for a few years before he moved in.
Do you think of a point of police?
I didn't think so because I assumed he probably found a better place, or he went and did his own thing and he just took off. I didn't think that he was killed. I kind of feel guilty because maybe I could have done more, but I don't know what more I could have done.
Just tell us about what he was like when you last saw him.
He was a nice guy. He never gave any, but like he was always nice to people, and he was nice to me. I mean, he paid his rent on time, he kept the apartment clean, and that was it.
Did he know Bruce McArthur as far as you know?
I don't know. I'd never heard of Bruce McArthur until, like, I never knew of him. I never knew anything about him.
I wanted to add that because I didn't get a lot of information about him, and it's kind of, even though it's sad, it's kind of nice to hear from a friend and kind of hear that he was missed, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then the next one is Karushna Kumar Kagnaratham. I think we already went through this, that I was terrible at his name, unfortunately. Was the youngest of this monster's victims at 37 years old. He made his way to Canada aboard the MV Sunsea, a dilapidated cargo vessel that reached the coastline of British Columbia. He was one of 492 Sri Lankan Tamils aboard the ship on a 6-week voyage. On the voyage, he was said to be an innocent, trusting, and helpful person, and he would often be seen playing cards and singing songs. Sadly, he led a very lonely life in British Columbia and made his way to Toronto to connect with distant relatives. In the end, his refugee status was denied, and a deportation order was given. He went into hiding and would work as a cleaner and mover until his death. He was the other man that was not reported missing, as people did not know where he was because he was in hiding. He spent 5 years in Canada before he was murdered. After the pathology examiners were finished and the coroner was done their work, and after the Crown and defense lawyers had all the information they needed for the trial, the bodies of the victims were released to their families. Memorials and funerals were held for the men between September and October 2017. January 2018 saw a publication ban put into place, actively silencing the media about what was happening with the legal proceedings. We do know that he was detained at the Toronto South Detention Centre, though. He was being held under suicide watch and held in segregation. He was held there at least until November 5th, 2018. I'm not sure what happened after that. He would make a court appearance on January 19th, 2018 to start the proceedings. The next time in court would be a brief appearance on January 29th, and then he would attend court via video link from then on. This time he was represented by a different lawyer, just as a note. I don't think he made friends with his lawyers. He would make another court appearance on February 14th. This one was noted as the third without a disclosure, so the lawyers on his side still hadn't got any of the evidence that was on him, which, I mean, is important in these cases. February 13th, the day before the previously mentioned court date, the Crown Attorney Mike Cantillon received disclosure for the police and was in the process of vetting and screening all of the information. Canton would state that in mid-March, one package of disclosure had been given to McArthur's lawyers. More was expected to be handed over in the following weeks, and some would be in excess of 10,000 pages. This just added to the complexity of the case. April 25th, it was announced that more disclosures would be handed over to the defense before the next court date on May 23rd, 2018. June 22nd set a milestone for this case, as the Crown would state that it disclosed all of the evidence to the defense team. June 20th was the date that a judicial pretrial hearing was scheduled. This was a closed-door meeting between the defense, Crown, and judge. This would address the issues such as the possibility of resolving the case without a trial. One way would be to do with a guilty plea. One way to do this would be with a guilty plea. Otherwise, it was to figure out the trial length as well as procedural and evidentiary issues. A former detective of the York Regional Police Forensics Unit, Kevin Bryson, was heard saying he thought this trial would be years away as there was so much evidence to be catalogued and disclosed. Bruce McArthur had an assault conviction in 2003, and media applied to have his psychiatric and pre-sentencing reports released. One of McArthur's lawyers argued that releasing this document could risk the ability to get him a fair trial, but Justice Leslie Chaplin felt that the reports were generally positive towards him and released them on June 27th, 2018. So there's already some information leaking out, right?
Yeah.
The justice allowed the media to view but not publish photographs of the victims' injuries and the weapons that he had used. They could not share the photos due to victims' privacy rights and the ability to give McArthur a fair trial. On October 22nd, McArthur would waive his right to a preliminary hearing as he did not contest the weight of evidence which warranted a trial. He was ordered to stand trial for 8 counts of first-degree murder. On November 5th, he made his first appearance at the Superior Court of Justice, where the judge John McCannon noted that back in 2016 there was a Supreme Court ruling that stated that this trial must be finished by August 2020. I'm noticing a lot that his lawyers are changing all the time, the judges are changing all the time. I don't really understand that, but he would again be in court on November 30th, where he was told that the trial would begin on January 6, 2020, and would likely last 3 to 4 months. Moved to January 28th, 2019, the Toronto Police Service announced there was an anticipated significant development in the McArthur case to take place the next day. People would begin arriving outside the courthouse at 6 a.m. on January 29th following a huge snowstorm the night before, and they moved the hearing into the largest courtroom they had available. McArthur would go on to plead guilty to all 8 first-degree murder charges, and this ended the possibility of a trial taking place.
That's quick.
Yeah. I guess there was just so much evidence, there's no point trying to fight it. So this next section is all direct quotes, all lifted right from Wikipedia. So this is McArthur. Guilty, McArthur softly replied 8 times in the cavernous downtown Toronto courtroom. Guilty to the planning and execution of 8 men. Guilty to the dismemberment and disposal of their bodies in the garden planters at 53 Malloy Crescent and the ravine adjacent to it. Guilty to preying on the most vulnerable, newly arrived gay men from the Middle East and South Asia, hunting them from 2010 to 2017, even as the LGBT community was raising the alarm about so many who were going missing in their midst. Reading from an agreed statement of fact, Kent Lawn divulged details of the killings which took place in Toronto between 2010 and 2017. Each murder was either premeditated or involved other crimes which qualified them as first degree. 6 were sexual in nature, and 5 included confinement. McArthur kept trophies from his victims, including jewelry and a notebook. DNA from 4 of the victims had been found in McArthur's van. Kentlon then outlined McArthur's post-defense rituals. McArthur had digital photographs of 7 of his victims, which were recovered forensically after he tried to delete them. He took staged post-mortem photographs, typically with ropes around their necks or with them nude in a fur coat or hat. Some photographs had them with their heads and beards shaved, and he had kept their hair in Ziploc bags in a shed at Mount Pleasant Cemetery.
Wow.
Yeah, this guy was really fucked. Kentlon said that McArthur sought out and exploited vulnerabilities in his victims and made his crimes difficult to detect. That he used sex to lure them, killing many in his bedroom, though, or through ligature strangulation. One photograph showed a rope around a victim's neck tied with a metal bar wrapped in tape, a mechanism to control the pressure during strangulation. So this is the end of that Wikipedia copied text.
Right.
Now it's back to my stuff. McArthur's sentencing began on February 4th and was scheduled to be finished on the 6th. There was a mandatory life sentence, 25 years without parole for first-degree murder, and because he pleaded guilty, there was no doubt that he would spend a minimum of 25 years in prison. The judge did have the option to ask him to serve concurrent terms, though. Regardless, he would not be eligible for parole until he was a minimum of 91 years old.
Wow.
Here are some quotes from the sentencing hearing. So this is all, I think this is all from the judge now. I am satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that these men died a slow and painful death by ligature strangulation for sexual gratification of Mr. McArthur, the Justice John McCowan told the court while delivering his sentence. All or most of the victims were vulnerable individuals who were lured to their deaths, no doubt on the promise of consensual sexual activity. The accused exploited his victims' vulnerabilities, whether they involved immigration concerns, mental health challenges, or people living a secretive double life. These 8 innocent victims then faced the greatest post-mortem indignity. Each was systematically cut up into pieces and buried in planters or in the ground in an unsuspecting person's property in Leaside. The ability to decapitate and dismember his victims and do it repeatedly is pure evil. Due to the accused age, I am satisfied that when dealing with the protection of the public, concurrent periods of parole ineligibility can adequately address the protection of the public. It would not be until Mr. McArthur is 91 years old that he could apply for consideration for parole.
Good.
I wish that they had actually done concurrently, that he would never see the light of day regardless. Although he'd probably die before anyways.
Exactly, though.
I'd still rather see it stockpiled. Sentencing the accused to parole ineligibility until he is 116 years of age is symbolic. There is a fine line between retribution, which is an appropriate sentencing principle, and vengeance, he said. So while I get that, I still don't agree. If the accused either had a trial or would have been younger, I would have no hesitation in imposing concurrent parole and eligibility terms to protect the public. All right, now we'll talk about this douchebag. I've waited till kind of the end to actually even really talk about Bruce McArthur because he's a piece of garbage. So, okay, now I guess it's time to talk about the scumbag Bruce McArthur. Thomas Donald Bruce McArthur was born on October 8th, 1951 in the town of Lindsay, Ontario. This is a town an hour and a half drive from Toronto, according to Google Maps. They then moved to a farm on the small hamlet of Argyle. For those like me that have no idea what a hamlet is, it's a settlement smaller than a village. The family had a daughter and also a steady stream of troubled children that they would foster. They would regularly have between 6 and 8 children coming and going. The family seemed to be a well-liked family back then, though. McArthur went to a one-room schoolhouse outside of the town of Woodville. He would always attempt to be the teacher's pet and would act as an informant to the teacher with his classmates. Little
Snitch.
shithead. Little snitch right from the start. Mm-hmm. His family was a religious one, but they always had some tension as both of his parents were devout, but his mother was a Catholic and his father was a Presbyterian. McArthur would always side with his mom in the religious arguments. Mm-hmm. So he didn't seem to have a good relationship with his father, and his father would always ridicule him. McArthur would explain this away as the fact that his father did not sense any masculinity in him and probably guessed that he was gay back then. Mm-hmm. So if that's the case, his father was probably a piece of shit. We don't know, though. McArthur had trouble with his sexuality being in a small town in rural Ontario, as it was not accepted in the 70s or whatever.
No.
When he moved to secondary school, he met and began to date Janice Campbell, and they both graduated from high school in 1970. So sorry, the 60s then.
Yep.
McArthur would go on to post-secondary in general business courses. When he turned 23, he and Janice would marry. So in 1973, McArthur would begin working at Eaton's department store, a former Canadian chain that at one time was the largest in the country, although it shut its doors in 1999. Do you remember Eaton's?
Yes.
I don't.
I do remember it, and it doesn't seem like it was that long ago.
Yeah, it's been a while now. Mm-hmm. So his position there was a buyer's assistant in the downtown Toronto building. Only a few blocks over at this time, while he was working at the Eatons, the gay village was forming in the Yonge Street area between College and Wellesley, as the decriminalization of same-sex sexual activity between consenting adults was decriminalized in 1969. It's hard to believe it had to be decriminalized.
Yeah, it really wasn't that long ago.
No, it wasn't, no. Mm-hmm. McArthur's father would be diagnosed with a brain tumor in the mid-1970s, and while he would live until 1981, he lived that time in a nursing home, while his mother would become interested in another man. Bruce was not okay with this, and became closer with his father because of it. Fucking patriarchy.
It's a horrible situation to be put in, for sure.
Exactly. His mother passed away from cancer in 1978. Like I said, his father passed away in 1981. McArthur would leave his job at Eaton's in 1978 and go out on the road as a traveling salesman for McGregor Socks, a company that still sells socks to this day in Canada.
How?
They sell socks to department stores now, so it's not traveling salespeople anymore. But
no, but like, oh my god, you saw one thing. That's.
I think they do other things than that. I think they're called something just like McGregor's now, but it was McGregor Socks back then in the late 70s. He would end up with the territories of Northern Ontario and the Greater Toronto area. It's kind of a large area. That is a
massive
Basically,
area.
It's just Ontario. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He would work by himself and go store to store and town to town with the aim of getting department stores to stock their products. Leaves a lot of openings for a guy like this to cause trouble around the province.
Like being a truck driver.
Yeah. Basically, he was a truck driver, but in a car. Uh-huh. In 1979, Bruce and his wife would move into a house in Oshawa to be closer to his remaining family. Mm-hmm. His wife would go on to have a daughter, Melanie, and a son, Todd. I think they were twins, because it just gives me the date or the year of 1981. Mm. So I'd assume they're both twins, but there's nothing that says twins. I tried to find any more information. There's not a lot of information on his family. I couldn't even find his parents' names. The family would go on to purchase a home in Oshawa in 1986. At this time, he became an active member in the church, as he was hoping to keep too busy to look into his homosexual feelings. It's never good to try to hide who you are. He would go on to move to a different clothing company sometime later. Moved to the early 1990s, Bruce McArthur was beginning to have sexual affairs with men. More than a year later, he would come out to his wife, although they would continue to live together as a family. That can't be easy.
No.
Like, disregard the fact this guy is a total piece of garbage. That would be a really hard thing to do, living together as a family when you know the partner is no longer interested in you.
Big kids, or did they have any kids?
Yeah, no, they had the 2 kids. I'm not
Yeah.
sure how old they would be at that time.
So probably she just did it for the kids.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
In 1990, things began to get difficult for the family as he lost his job in the clothing business and financial issues started to crop up. This was only worsened by the fact that their teenage son, Todd, was making obscene phone calls to random women obsessively, and the issue would lead to the courts.
Oh, wow.
I think I left it out, but it became an issue again later. Like, his son has got some serious issues, too. In 1997, they would be forced to mortgage their house, and in 1999, they were forced to declare bankruptcy. 1997 spelled the end of their marriage, though, and he would move to Toronto as there was no gay community in the town of Oshawa in the 1990s. He would spend a lot
Or
of
now.
I don't even know, but it just said, in all my research, it said now.
I get it.
He would spend a lot of time in the bars of Church and Wellesley and would end up moving into an apartment in the area. He was at the time working on a 4-year relationship with a man. With the relationship ending and his divorce being finalized, Bruce ended up seeing a psychiatrist and was given Prozac for several months. It was around this time that he would begin his landscaping career. The last time he kind of surfaced was in 1997, and then he didn't surface for a little while after that. This did not last forever, though, as Halloween 2001 ended with an assault. Bruce McArthur had met a sex worker on a chat line previously and had had sex with him. Big surprise. Around noon on Halloween, a few weeks after his 50th birthday, he was invited into this man's apartment to see his Halloween costume. Once inside, he began to strike the man from behind with an iron pipe that he just happened to carry around with him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was he like a plumber for Halloween, or?
I don't know. There wasn't even talk of Bruce McArthur being dressed for Halloween.
How dare you ruin Halloween, though, the best holiday ever.
Yeah. The victim had lost consciousness, but once he woke up, he called 911 and was taken to St. Michael's Hospital. His injuries would include both injuries to his body and his head. He would be given several stitches to the back of his head and to his fingers and would require 6 weeks of physiotherapy.
Oh my God.
McArthur ended up turning himself in for this attack, but would claim that he did not remember attacking the man or why he would have done it. In what would turn out to be a habit, he pleaded guilty to these charges of assault with a weapon and assault causing bodily harm. He was sentenced to 729 days or 2 years less a day of conditional sentence on April 11th, 2003. But a conditional sentence is more or less like bail, as he serves his sentence out of prison but must follow conditions to stay out.
That's bullshit.
Yeah. He was supposed to have a concealed weapons charge, but it was dropped after a psychiatrist said that he was a low risk to reoffend. I bet they wish they could take this back now. The victim never spoke as he was traumatized by the attack, and they claimed his behavior on his anti-seizure medication mixed with amytal nitrate, also known as poppers, that were used for an enhanced sexual pleasure. Yeah. His first year of his sentence was under house arrest, and after that he was given a curfew of 10 p.m. for 6 months. Once the sentence was finished, he was given 3 years of probation. During the sentence, he was also barred from entering the gay village. He had to stay 10 meters or 33 feet from his victim's home and workplace, and was barred from spending time with male sex workers. He also had a 10-year restriction on gun ownership, and was not allowed to purchase any drugs without a prescription. I mean, good for them for barring him from gun use, but he never really used guns anyways.
Sorry, part of his sentence was not being able to purchase drugs without a prescription?
Yes.
Isn't that everybody? Isn't that everyone?
Just in general, because he was doing poppers and all that, so they were trying to say, like, you can't have anything but your prescription drugs you have to have. So, like...
But isn't that everyone? You're not supposed to legally buy poppers.
Yeah, well, I think they're saying anything, though. Like, literally, you can't go to the drugstore and pick something up unless it's a prescription, is what they're saying.
So if he needed, like, ibuprofen?
It sounds like he'd have to have a prescription, yeah.
Wow. That's
They're trying to, cover all bases, because they're trying to claim that his combination of medications caused him to do it, right?
No, he's just a piece of shit.
Yeah. So at least at this time, his DNA was added to the police database.
Well, that's good.
So there is that. Mm-hmm. Disgustingly enough, in 2014, this attack was scrubbed from the record and would not be found in criminal background checks in subsequent investigations.
Why? Don't know.
No.
Okay.
In 2010, most of the records were destroyed by the Toronto Police Service. The only documents that survived were the transcripts of the guilty plea, sentencing hearing, the psychiatric report, and pre-sentencing report, as well as photos of the victims and weapon. But everything else was destroyed. Good job, Toronto Police. Well, waiting for sentencing, McArthur would register with Recon, a gay fetish dating app for men that were into the BDSM world, and noted he was interested in submissive men. Mm-hmm. He was also active on other dating websites and apps, including Silver Daddies, Man Jam, Grindr, Bear 411, Bear Forest, Scruff, Daddy Hunt, Squirt, and Growler.
Wow.
The name of these sites are quite interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Man Jam? Really?
It makes gonna go get my growler filled sound really dirty.
It does. When McArthur was barred from the Church and Wellesley area, he stayed well known in the area as he was developing a reputation for rough sex, BDSM, and he had a horrible explosive temper. It was in 2007 or 2008 when he would move into his 19th floor apartment at the Leaside Towers, where he would eventually be caught. The tower was located about 5 kilometers or 3 miles from the gay village and was populated mainly by immigrants. So just who he was looking for.
Yeah, just his cup of tea.
It was around this time that McArthur would become a self-employed landscaper under the business name of Artistic Designs. It sounds like he was really more of a glorified gardener with crappy old tools, though. Mm-hmm. He did have a good stable of wealthy elderly female clients, though, that found him to be quite charming. In the winter, he would be a mall Santa at the Ancourt Mall and would also make floral gifts for charities. Just what you want, this piece of shit around your kids.
Well, I mean, he didn't have any interest in them at least, so.
Hopefully.
Well, it doesn't seem like that.
Yeah, that's true. There was also an alleged assault in 2016 that took place in North York. It is alleged that McArthur was with an unidentified man in his van at a McDonald's parking lot that he had met on a dating app. They were in the back of his van masturbating each other when McArthur allegedly began to throttle him. Luckily for this man, he said he was able to break free and reported the incident to the police. He was, according to one unnamed source, arrested by the Toronto Police 41st Division in Scarborough and then moved to the 32nd Division in North York, where they continued the investigation. In the end, there was never a report filed, and McArthur was not charged.
What the hell?
Homicide investigators only learned of this alleged assault after the arrest, and the man came forward again. This man was an acquaintance of McArthur and said that the incident started as a consensual sexual encounter. McArthur did have photos of the man in a fur coat that was very similar to the one that he posted his victims in, though. On February 1st, 2019, a Toronto Police Service officer from 32nd Division was charged with insubordination and neglect of duty, in this case, by the Professional Standards Unit. This charge was not criminal, though, in nature, as they mentioned that he had 15 years on the job and was highly regarded by his fellow police officers. So this is going to be before the tribunal on February 5th, 2019, and is currently February 10th. So that's still ongoing. So that's my case on Bruce McArthur.
Wow.
So, yeah, real piece of work. So I'm glad that he will be in jail, at least until he's 91 years old, but...
He still should have been caught so much earlier.
Yeah.
But, I mean, he did choose his victims to be, sadly, that, like, people who were less, like it would have been a lot harder to track these people.
Unfortunately, he picked his victims much like Willie Pickton did.
Yeah.
He went for people that wouldn't be missed as much.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
And
but it's not even that the people that he picked wouldn't be missed. It was just that they wouldn't know where these guys were.
Yeah.
Well, they were married, they had families, they would be missed, but because that part of their life was so hidden.
Yeah, that's what I mean. The families wouldn't know where to look. They didn't know that they were gay, so they didn't know where to look for them. Mm-hmm. So they just assumed they disappeared.
Yeah.
So it's really sad.
Horrible.
Yeah. But hopefully you enjoyed this episode. I'm happy that when I did this, they had just put down the sentencing, because I wanted to do this earlier, but I just didn't want to do it before there was actually charges and sentencing done. Because it's kind of shitty to do a whole episode and then not know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And you know what's coming. So hopefully you enjoyed this episode. You can find us on Twitter at Brew Crime. You can find us on Facebook at Brew Crime, or our group at facebook.com/groups/Brew Crime. You can find us on Instagram at Pacific Beer Chat. You can email us at brewcrime@pacificbeerchat.com and send us ideas for new themes or stories. You can find all our information for all of our episodes and all of our sources at brewcrime.com. And thanks for listening.
Yeah, and if you're really lucky, you can find us at a local brewery.
That's for sure, yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Till next time.
Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Brewcrime's intro was created by Mike using Creative Commons Attribution licensed audio from purple-planet.com, soundbible.com, and freesoundeffects.com. Logo design was by Ben Greenberg. All cases and stories were written by Beck, Nina, and Mike, and our sources are put into the show notes for each episode. We always want to give credit to the people that research the cases we talk about. Check out our store at brewcrime.threadless.com, where you can purchase swag like t-shirts, phone cases, beach towels, and all kinds of cool stuff. We can also be found on your favorite podcast apps, our host, Spreaker.com, or brewcrime.com, as well as at Brewcrime on Twitter, at Brewcrime on Facebook, at facebook.com/groups/Brewcrime. Thanks for listening. This has been a production of Pacific Beer Chat. Now here is a promo from a fellow true crime or spooky podcast that we really enjoy. Hope you'll take a listen.
Hey, this is Heath.
And this is Daphne.
And we're the hosts of Going West, a true crime podcast,
where we discuss various murders, disappearances, and serial killers.
Each week we go into the gory details of a new case.
Like episode 5, which is about Dorothy Jane Scott, a single mother who was receiving threatening phone calls by a stalker and then mysteriously disappeared.
Or the terrifying case of Dayton Leroy Rogers, the most prolific serial killer in Oregon history.
You can find us on our Instagram at Going West Podcast, or check out our website, goingwestpodcast.com.
You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Stitcher, and Spotify.
So make sure to check out our episodes and leave a review.
Everybody in the world, keep it real and stay weird.
Cheerio.
That's cool.
Do you want help?
No, I'm just going to get a picture.
I was like, you're just stuttering.
All right, what the Toronto Police Service did know was that they're... sorry.
Unacceptable.
I'll allow it.
Oh, okay. Fuck. Outruled.
Yes.
The project opened up with the investigation of the disappearance of... Oh, shoot, I could say this earlier.
A name?
Yeah. The project opened up... The investigation...
I gotta point out, it's freaking snowing.
What?
Sorry.
Oh my god, it actually is!
It's like...
It's real snowing.
I looked outside for a second while you were trying to say that name, so I didn't start laughing. And then I was like, holy fuck, it's snowing.
Vancouver. Wow.
Bullshit. Okay. Back to Zanzibar.
What?
What's his name?
Zanzibar.
I'm going to say this one again, actually. These names shouldn't be hanging out. I haven't said them out loud, though.
It sounded good in my head.
Yeah, it did, actually, yeah.
So did Zanzibar.
It sounded good in my sober head. Now we're on story
Actually, no,
3.
it sounded great in my not sober head as I wrote it. Okay. He was a retired God damn it.
How's that super dark beer yours going down?
It's not that. It's just beer in general. This isn't all that carbonated compared to some. It's like your beer would make me burpier.
Yeah.
Really?
Oh my god, lager kills me. I can barely drink it.
Oh. More from me.
Enjoy being young.
Is that like a threat?
Yes.
No, then I'd be like, enjoy being young.
I don't know, that's how I heard it the first time.
Enjoy
No more
being
meow.
young, 'cause it's...
To
You'll
be
never
fair,
live to be old. No.
yeah, to be fair, I don't even remember how old you are, so it doesn't matter.
Old enough to party.
You're younger? So at least 16? Like, what does that mean?
Oh, God.
Because kids party more than I do.
I'm a 90s baby, let's just say that.
Oh my god.
All right.
Specifically 90.
Okay.
I think I'm going to cut that and put it at the end. It's too happy.
Nah.
Yeah. This task force.
This task first.
Task first.
The task force
They were
was
the
no.
first.
It's the first of the task. First product Houston.
First task.
Wow, that was very feminine of you. Can you say that again?
That's the first task.
That was terrifying.
It was great. All right. The task force was known as Project Prism, an apt name as it was. Oh. I don't even know if I like this sentence now.
Change it. Fuck it. Who cares?
What do you think?
Say it.
Oh, jeez. From there. I see where I was going with it, but I don't know if I like it.
Maybe you just end it at I mean, it's nice, but it might be a bit highbrow for us.
For you, maybe.
Oh, bitch.
Huh? I'm so out of the loop. Hit me with the sentence. Maybe I get it.
Just read it. We can decide later.
We'll decide if Nina gets it.
Okay. As well as half a dozen from
From Project Runway. Sorry.
Oh, good.
Don't apologize.
It felt right.
It was right.
All right.
Fucking love that show. Okay.
I've never seen it, but I know what it's about. I don't have TV.
Let me just recover.
That was just all the things I expected you to say. I just wasn't not those.
Just not right then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, just not those two things.
Oh. I can't laugh for this.
No.
Bruce McArthur. God damn it. I thought I was being smarter not by picking one from Russia. Mm-hmm. He was not known to be part of the gay... regardless, he would not be eligible for patrol. Regardless,
Parole.
So move to the early 90s. Bruce McArthur was beginning to have a sexual affair... Or... Moose. Seeing a psychiatrist